Please note, the following stories are all told in a female's perspective. This is my first time posting anything here, but I feel like I have an interesting story to share. I've always wanted to turn it into a book or something, but I've been super busy with school. To start out, this story sort of takes place on and off again throughout most of my life. It starts out as a typical, my parents got a divorce when I was young situation, but it unfolded into so much more. In fact, I'm still picking up pieces of everything that happened. Just a warning, this is a super long story. I don't blame you if you lose interest halfway in. There's a lot of backstory that I feel is important to understanding what happened. As it stands now, my father is dead. It was ruled a suicide, but I think that was only half of what happened. I'll talk about everything that led up to this, but more importantly, I believe that Mary definitely had a hand in what happened. My mother and father divorced when I was around 4. Almost everyone I know has gone through some sort of similar situation. I have 2 brothers, one older and one younger. We saw him about every other weekend. He paid child support, you get the gist. One weekend visit, my father introduces us to a woman he's seeing, named Mary. Her eyes and hair are dark, and her skin is pale. She had an obsession with the color red. Something was immediately off to me, but I didn't really start to know what she was capable of until later. I didn't know it at the time, but Mary was one of the main reasons my parents got divorced. My father cheated on my mother with her. He met her while he was working as a waiter at a Red Lobster. When he moved over to his career at a casino as a slot machine repairman, she followed. Mary would follow my dad anywhere. They got married pretty quickly after my mother and father divorced. I never even knew there was a wedding until later. My mother hated her, but she never badmouthed my father or Mary in front of my brothers and I. She felt that it was important for us to make judgments for ourselves, even if this woman was part of the reason her marriage was broken up. We continued to visit what was now Dad's and Mary's house on our scheduled time with Dad. I always associated their house with red. Their house was always decorated with strawberries. Mary liked red sheets, and she had red sweaters and pants. It was weird. Mary was just unnecessary drama for a while. Things like buying us toys that we could only keep at Dad's and Mary's house, or saying that she and my father wanted to get custody of us instead of my mom. I feel like these things were harmless in a way. Every divorcing couple probably has some sort of variation. Things carried on like this for a couple of years. We would have a special variation of Christmas or Easter or whatever aside from what we celebrated with my mom. I was about 7 or 8 when I remember the first incident that confirmed that I knew this wasn't right. My little brother was a super curious child, and he was about 4 at the time. He had scooted a dining table chair to the fridge to get a cereal box on top, and when he reached up, he pulled down a handgun instead of a box of cereal. I panicked and got my dad, who acted really funny about it. My memory is fuzzy, but I remember going home early that weekend. My dad didn't know the gun was there because it was Mary's. It was at this point that my mom started to have trouble with us going over there. My father got worse about being able to come pick us up. He was unreliable for the most part to begin with, but I knew that he was 10 times worse when he was around Mary. My mom told me later, when I was much older, that Mary called our house around the time of the gun incident and said, "I want your life." My mother is a really tough lady. She grew up in East LA in California. This scared her. She was going to get a restraining order soon. I guess what Mary meant was that she wanted my mom's stability. Even as a single mom with 3 kids, she was doing very well for herself, and even dating. But even so, how long had she been obsessed with my mom before she and my father even got divorced? What did that even mean? Not long after the phone call, my mom heard her car being smashed into one night. Someone had taken a brick and smashed the driver window. Nothing was taken. I know it was Mary. We had no way to prove it, but I just know. My dad and Mary had a baby. Her name is Madison. I only remember holding and playing with her for so long. I can't imagine all the crap she's been through. My mom met and married my stepdad pretty soon after that, and they decided it would be best to move to Florida. We had other family there, and there weren't many jobs where we were living in Tennessee. I don't remember any problems at all when we were so far away from my dad and Mary. We stayed there for about a year, and then we moved back to Tennessee. My stepdad was able to get a better job again, and we were closer to my mom's parents. This is when the phone calls start. As soon as we moved back, we would get phone calls where someone would just listen for a few moments, then hang up. The numbers were always blocked, but I'm sure it was her. She always knew where we lived because we started seeing my dad again. The calls continued for years. It became like an inside joke. We all knew who it was, but there wasn't anything we could do. My father denied it. Anytime I asked him about it, he took her side. We fell into this thing where my mom was the bad guy, and anytime I questioned my dad and Mary's behavior, they were certain my mom was putting me up to it. Things escalated one night when my dad came to pick us up for a visit. My mom and Mary ended up getting into a fist fight, where Mary swung first, and my mom punched her so hard she fell backwards. My brothers and I watched from the apartment we were living in at the time. Mom went immediately to the cops, but my dad and Mary never even called. My mom didn't press any charges, and the whole incident sort of faded away. We ended up moving into a big house a while after that, where we still are today. Dad and Mary started to have problems and split up. I thought maybe she would be gone for good, or at least gone for the most part, but she never really went away. My dad started to become a person we could somewhat rely on again when she was gone. I got to know my little sister more, the baby they had, and things were okay. She started coming around again, though. Whenever she was with my dad in front of us, she would whisper in his ear. My dad would drink more. He became physically ill-looking and would start to gain weight. We could always tell when Mary was around because the difference was so drastic. He even officially divorced her at one point, but it was obvious that they still got together off and on. My brothers and I went on with our lives, and we became too old for visiting the way we were. Whole weekend visits became just going to see my dad for an evening. The whole time, however, the phone calls never stopped. They weren't as frequent, but they were there in the background, like a reminder that she was always there, lurking. When I got into high school, visits from my dad just about stopped altogether. We usually talked on the phone here and there, and I saw him when I had events like a marching band competition, a formal dance, milestones like graduating high school, etc. It was pretty common to go a while without hearing from him again. Mary was only a thought. I hadn't seen her in years. I never saw her anywhere, at all. The phone calls had stopped, but only because we had gotten rid of the house phone. I was a freshman in college, and I remember it being right around Halloween of 2009. I was shopping with my aunt for some cheap decorations at the Walmart by my house. I saw a woman walking slowly behind us, and my aunt and I both did a double take. It was Mary. She was totally following us around the store. She looked like she was maybe 50 years older than when I last saw her, and her clothes were disheveled. My aunt kept elbowing me to go talk to her because we weren't exactly sure if this was really her. It could have been someone who just looked really similar. I worked up the nerve and went up to her. "Is your name Mary?" I asked. "Yes, it is. Hi, Samantha. How are you?" Using my name like that really caught me off guard. She knew who I was and wasn't bothered to talk to me. She didn't even act like she was being caught. I asked her if she had talked to my dad lately because it had been a while since I last heard from him. She swore up and down that she hadn't spoken to him for months, which I later found out was a lie. This was the beginning of my dad going missing. After I saw her, something happened, and it's hard to pin down what, but he completely disappeared. His cell phone was shut off, and when I called his work at the casino, where he had been working for over 15 years, they said that he was no longer working there, and couldn't tell me why. My mom and brothers and I called the police to file a missing persons report. We didn't have to wait because it had already been several weeks since we had heard from him. They helped us make a flyer, and we looked and asked all over. Everything led back to Mary most likely being the last one to see him. By the time we started talking to her, it was mid-November. My mom and I called Mary, and she would tell us that she had in fact seen my dad on the night after Halloween. She told us that he was making a noose, and that this would be the last time anyone ever saw him. We honestly didn't know what to believe. My dad was an alcoholic. It wasn't uncommon for him to say drastic stuff, but we never considered suicide. When we told the detectives what Mary told us, they had her come in for questioning. She had told the detectives a completely different story, and her dates kept changing. There wasn't any evidence of anything, though, so there wasn't much they could do. The detectives did, however, tell us that we shouldn't talk to her anymore. To quote them, "We don't know what she's capable of." Things went on like this until they found him on January 4th, 2010. My dad was found dead in a storage unit. He had pulled his car in, shut the unit door, and let the car run until he died, and he had been there for 63 days. There were several suicide notes, all dated for November 2nd, one for my mom and one for each of his children. But there was an especially long note for Mary, where he doted on her and talked about what a wonderful woman she was. The suicide note even said for her to take any insurance money and use it on herself. The date on the notes was so close to the day where Mary said she had seen him. There were a million things that could have happened, but I know that she had something to do with it. Even if my father really did kill himself, I know that she helped push him over the edge. I'm not one to just blame someone. I know my father was a troubled man. He was an alcoholic, and he was a depressant most of the time, usually because of Mary. But there's something so frustrating and horrendous about this woman, and there's zero evidence for me to prove anything against her. She wasn't allowed to come to the funeral. My mom and parts of his family put everything together. There wasn't anyone he knew that hadn't heard of her, and everyone felt that she was a bad woman. I found a Facebook profile of hers months after they found my dad. There were only 5 or 6 photos of her and some guy, obviously happy, and they were all dated for January 4th, 2010. The next year, on January 4th, 2011, she showed up at my family's house. We didn't let her in the house, and she kept saying something about having some stuff of my dad's in the car. We told her to leave, or else we would call the police. That night, someone put red tissue paper in and around our mailbox. Even the next year, 2012, she called my mom and asked her to meet her in a Sonic Burger parking lot. She said she had a box of my dad's stuff to give us. My mom made my stepdad go instead of her, but she never showed. I feel like she wanted to do something bad to my mom. The next year, we didn't hear from her. I did some research, and it turns out she was put in jail for making meth. It made a lot of sense for some of the things, but I still have so many questions and issues that are unanswered. Supposedly, she was let out sometime last year, summer of 2014, I think. The correctional facility she was at has a website, and it says that she was let out for good behavior and rehab. I found a different Facebook that showed her with some other family. God help them if she's pulling the same crap as she did with mine. Today, I have no idea where she is, and until I can move far away, I don't want to see Mary ever again. Update, August 5th, 2015. I just wanted to update this while it's still fresh in my mind. My little brother received a visit from Mary in person. My little brother works at a video game store. It was around 8 p.m. last night, and Madison, Mary's daughter, came in to buy a video game. My little brother was shocked, and he didn't recognize her. She introduced herself, and my little brother couldn't do much. She asked for his phone number, but my brother didn't end up giving it to her because he had a weird feeling in his stomach. She took what she bought and left, and my little brother thought that was the end of it. But maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, in walks Madison again, with Mary by her side. My little brother immediately recognized her and started to panic. Mary and Madison stood at the back of the store, whispering to each other. He said that they were both smiling the whole time, and a couple of times they giggled to each other. Mary then looked at him right in the eyes and started to head towards the counter my brother was behind. He said that he felt so angry and his heart started to race. Instead of trying to confront her, he walked into the back of the store and let his coworker ask if he could help her. Maybe 10 minutes later, she was gone, and his coworker told him that she left without asking for anything. My brother thinks that she was just making her presence known, and that she thought she could catch up with him like they were friends or something. I just know that I don't want this woman in my life anymore. I don't want her harassing my family members, and I want to move away as far as possible. We documented this incident with the police department, and they said that if it happens 3 times, that we can file for a restraining order. I don't really know what else to do. Anyway, I just thought this might be something you guys are interested in hearing. As much as I thought it finally might be over, she pops right back up again. It's not enough for her that my dad is dead. I guess she wants to have the last word. She always wanted to have the upper hand. But yeah, I'll keep everyone updated if I find out more. So this is being posted because, as the title says, my creeper father has made a comeback. At least, he attempted to. Due to his attempt, I was reminded of some of his creepy moments and decided to share some of them. Quick notes. Parents divorced when I was 7. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and I'm currently 28 years old. None of us have spoken to him in 6 or 7 years. He recently attempted contact, but none of us were willing to deal with him. I did a post a year or 2 back about how his family tended to watch my siblings and I sleep when we visited. They did that for years, and to this day, we don't understand why. I also made a post about his mother attempting to kidnap me from school after the divorce. I intended to post more creepy family antics, but I became busy with life. Now that we're all caught up, let's get to the meat of all of this. So, my father is at the worst of times a mentally unstable abuser, and at best, a deadbeat dad. After the divorce, we saw him less and less, and because of this and court papers, his abuse became less physical and more creepy. He would do things like walk in on my siblings and I changing or in the shower by picking the lock. Upon entering, he would say he had to ask us something. Usually it was something like what we wanted for dinner, or if we wanted to go see our grandparents. Things that easily could have been asked through a door, or even waited until we were done. I have 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. We all grew up very close, and at our youngest ages tended to change or shower together, so no one was left alone with Dad. As we grew up, we learned how to keep him out of the room and bathroom. So he began to do other things, rubbing my younger brother's inner thigh when he was 4, and talking about how much he looked like our mother, slapping one of my younger sisters on the butt as she went up to accept an award at school when she was 8 or 9. This stuff became pretty normal, despite our visits being sporadic. When he would focus on making life hard for my mom, he would file with the courts saying she was keeping us from seeing him, when in actuality he was just never picking us up. When I was 15, we got a call from my father's stepdad, informing us that our father was missing. This was news to us at the time, because we hadn't heard from him for 3 years. However, my grandpa claimed that Dad talked about seeing us all the time. 2 weeks go by since Grandpa called, and still no sign of Dad. One day, Mom picks all of us up early from school with the news that Dad had been found. We weren't sure how to feel, of course, but that soon changed when Mom began to drive to an aunt's house 4 hours away. We realized something was going on, and asked what it was. Mom said it wasn't the cops who found Dad, it was Grandpa. He had been found half a mile away from where we were living. His car was loaded with hunting equipment, though he didn't hunt, and a picture of me and another of my mother. Both of our faces were scratched out, and he'd been muttering about how to kill us. Now apparently, Grandpa moved Dad in his car, took his hunting equipment, and then phoned Mom about it. Then Grandpa phoned the cops anonymously to go pick up the crazy man outside of a Kmart. The cops magically found Dad outside of the Kmart under severe mental duress, shouting about how someone had taken his hunting bow set and shotgun. Dad didn't have any of that registered, so they didn't know if he had it or if it was just in his head. They take him in, and they have no clue about Grandpa's involvement. Months later, he is released with a bunch of pills to keep him in check, but he never takes them. He is granted continued visitation with us, spends the next few years seeing us even more sporadically, but still filing reports that my mother never lets him see us. He shows up at my brother's middle school when he was 14, attempts to pull him out of class to take him to go see a prostitute. When my brother refuses to go, Daddy Dearest decides to cause a scene and tries to fistfight my little brother. Campus police get involved, and when my dad is questioned, he informs them that my brother doesn't respect him because of me. Father is escorted off of campus and banned. We hear nothing from him again for another couple of years. Then he shows up, demands visitation with my siblings, which the court still lets him have for some reason, and because I'm over 18, I didn't have to see him. I was already at a friend's house, so my mom told him that she'd call me. He said don't bother. He took the other 3 to see our grandparents. In the midst of berating my 3 siblings and talking smack about my mother and I, my littlest sister stands up to him. Support is given by the other two with her, and Dad returns them to my mother, saying that I have poisoned them against him. I reach 22. We are called and told his mother is dying. All of us attend, and we say goodbye and pay our respects at the funeral, returning to our schooling, lives, and jobs. I get married and don't even get a card from him. Both sisters graduate college, and he never shows up to the ceremonies. Little brother graduates high school and not even a phone call. Last week, he sends 3 out of the 4 of us a message on Facebook. None of us have him blocked, but we don't have him added either. My brother received a message saying how, "You know Daddy loves you, and his life has been really hard. I've tried to always be there for you and do what's best. Your mother always stopped me. She and your older sister hate me. Please talk to me so I can tell you how my life has been." A sister received something similar in phrasing. Neither message asked about their lives at all. In my message, he says he stayed away because of me and my request. That even though I've deprived him of interaction with my siblings, he still loves me and wants to tell me about his life. He goes on to remind me that the family was broken up because of me. My marriage is briefly mentioned in an, "Oh yeah, you got married, my life is terrible, you need to message me so I can tell you about it," kind of way. When we informed our mother, she told me she got a call from the state where my dad lived, but didn't answer because she wasn't home. She hadn't called him back because, in honesty, she didn't know the number was his, and didn't think about it being from him until we told her. She listened to the message he left. Turned out he just breathed into the phone for a bit before saying her name, my name, and my siblings' names, then more breathing till the machine cut him off. All of us agreed that we didn't want to deal with this creep anymore. So Dad, let's not meet again. I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of L&M situations I encountered, but one in particular still makes my skin crawl more than any other. I was born and raised in Texas, but had moved to New York when I was 21. So when I found out at the beginning of a week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night I arrived when he got off work, and the following day we were going to meet up with our dad, who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown, the crew and I check in, and then we each head off to our own rooms. Short elevator ride and I get to mine, where not even 5 minutes later, there's a loud, hard knock on the door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called either my dad or brother to let them know I was in town yet, so they wouldn't know what room I was in. I assumed it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to the door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud male voice on the other side boomed, "The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in," before trying to open the door. "Unlock the door and open up, miss. I need to come in, now." I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet, let alone called anything to the front desk. I'm a petite woman, and while I take no crap from anyone despite my size, I'm still very cautious about things like this. Slowly inching toward the door to look out the peephole, all I could tell was that the man on the other side was at least 6 feet tall and easily over double my weight. There was no way in hell I was going to unlock the door for him. I responded to the guy, telling him he must have the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed to come in, and was getting in the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab the phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone up to my room, nor had they received a call about the bathroom. The entire time, this guy was still determined to get in my room, pounding and yelling. Lucky for me, the front desk had dispatched security to my floor. When the security officers step off the elevator a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hall approach and ask the guy who he was, what he was doing, and telling him he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive toward them, and the front desk clerk I'm still on the phone with tells me the police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared to death. Long story short, the cops show up pretty quickly and manage to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or something like that. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to a string of break-ins and violent sexual assaults in Austin. He had seen and stalked me from the minute I entered the hotel lobby. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that, and it still rattled the heck out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. What's up, everybody? This is the Lone Wolf here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 stories. Today's video is very special because it is my very first video containing stories from Reddit. I'm so happy to be able to read these stories on my channel, and I just want to take this moment right now to thank all of the Redditors who allowed me to read their stories. There will be links in the description for the individual Reddit posts in case any of you guys are interested in reading the stories for yourself. I also want to take this time to mention that my channel has just reached 100 subscribers. I'm so happy that 100 of you guys enjoy listening to my videos, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for sticking with me and for watching all of my videos. I really appreciate it. Anyways, if you're new to my channel, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you enjoyed listening to my narrations. Hit that bell for notifications and join the Lone Wolf Pack. If you guys want to send me a message or maybe a personal scary story that you want me to read, there will be a link to my email account and my Twitter account in the description below. There will also be links in the description for the music artists that I used in this video, as well as the individual tracks that I used in case you're interested in the music. And last but not least, if any of you guys have any ideas or tips for me to make my channel even better, please leave me a comment or send me a personal message. Stay spooky, you guys. And remember, the hunt begins when the moon is full. See you soon.